Go. Tom, do you want to record from your end?
Sure. Okay, I think I just did that.
All right. And so welcome everybody. My name is Danielle Graham. You've gotten lots of emails from me. You've all been learning Google Classroom along with the rest of us, which has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us for Birding in the Quarantine. This is going to be a wonderful class, and I'm going to quickly turn this on to Tom Bancroft, who's our instructor, with one last reminder for people to mute themselves and turn off their video. And if you can't figure out how to do that, it's okay. I'm going to do that for you just right now. And on to you, Tom.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this birding class. I'm really excited to share the wonders of birds with you and help you get more joy and fun out of birds. I'm Thomas Bancroft, and I've loved birds for as long as I can remember. One of my oldest memories is of climbing into my mother's sink, putting my shoes right in the middle of the sink so I could look out the kitchen window and see her bird feeder. She caught me, but she didn't yell at me. She didn't scold me. And instead, she helped me identify black-capped chickadees, and I remember them dearly. They come to my feeder here in Seattle now. I was 5 years old. I studied birds in undergraduate school and graduate school, worked on bird issues in the Everglades and the Florida Keys for National Audubon, then went to Washington, D.C. to lead the science division for the Wilderness Society and then National Audubon before I came out here. And now I'm all focused on helping people learn and see more in wild country. And so that brings me to this class. My goal in this class is just to help you develop the skills to identify birds and get more joy out of that. So how are we going to do that? I think tonight we'll work on some skills for bird identification. I want to use Merlin and help you learn how to really get some of the power out of that. Start a little bit on learning bird songs, practice identifying some birds of some of the very common birds here in Western Washington. Now, as Danielle said, this is going to be a lot of information, and just take it at your own pace. We'll go over a lot, but this class is all about you. It's not about the amount of information we go over. It's about helping you see more birds, begin to appreciate them more, begin to hear them. And so that's what we're going to work on. We'll use the Merlin app. You still have time to download it if you don't have it on your phone. And it will take a little while to load the US West Coast bird pack. So I would get it downloaded right now and try to get that bird pack loaded while we go through a first set of things. And then we're going to use it to try to identify a few birds later on. And also make sure you sign up for Google Classroom. We're going to put a lot of stuff on Google Classroom, and they'll be available for you to download. So, you know, you've probably seen people that have been able to identify a bird based upon a quick glimpse, or it flew by and you only just barely saw it and they knew what it was. But how did they do that? They don't focus on a lot of the details. Instead, they're using a broad set of characteristics, and that's what we're going to go over today, is help you develop those same kind of skills. So what they do is they focus on size and shape, color patterns, and this is the big color patterns, not the specific details, behavior, habitat, and songs and calls, and use those 5 things to help you figure out what kind of bird you're seeing. And we'll work through all of those right now. So in order to do that, you need to know a little bit about the parts of the bird, because anytime you look them up in a book, you're going to see things that say, oh, it had a certain color of the lore. Well, the lore is hold on a second. So the lore is in this area right here, right? I got to go over, let me back up one here. The lore is in this area here. So why is it changing on me? So that you need to learn some of these parts of the birds. I'm trying to find the drawing tools, which are normally right here. Maybe I don't get them in this version. Okay, so the parts of the bird, so you know, they're talking about a breast area or a mustache, or does it have an eye line? Does it have wing bars? These are all helpful in helping you identify it. So I think spending a little bit of time trying to understand the parts of the bird is going to be really helpful. And we'll work on that as we go through here. So size. Don't think about size in terms of inches. Think about its size in terms of relative to something else. Cornell Lab of Ornithology put together this yardstick. It's their bird yardstick, and that's the yardstick we're going to use to measure size. It's in relative to other birds, and there's 4 birds on this yardstick. The house sparrow is the smallest one, an American robin, the American crow, and then the Canada goose. And so when we talk about size, we want to know relative to this yardstick. Is it the size of a sparrow? Is it in between a sparrow and a robin? Is it in between a crow and a Canada goose, or the size of a Canada goose? So looking at size is relative, and this is our yardstick we'll use. Shape is a really good character to focus on. Birds have different shape based upon what they do. And so paying attention to the shape. And the key things are the head, the bill length and the shape of the head, the bill, the wing length and the tail length, and then we'll compare those in some birds. But you can see in these birds that are right here that shape varies a lot. We've got a duck. This is actually a mallard, which you would know by that curl there, and then a wren and a sparrow. Now, here's an interesting challenge for you. Birds have feathers, and they can move those feathers. They adjust them. When they're cold, they puff them out. When they're hot, they slick them down. If they're in confrontations, they may adjust them in certain ways. These bottom 2 birds are both American robins, and the one on the left has its feathers slicked. The one on the right has its feathers slicked down. The one on the left has the feathers puffed out. So you can see that kind of variation. Now, this picture came out of the inside of Peterson's Field Guide to the Western Birds, and it just shows you shape. But yet you can identify many of these species based upon shape. Now, if you look at number 6, there's some you can't. So number 6 up here on the wires is listed as a blackbird. And in our area, we have both Brewer's blackbirds and red-winged blackbirds, and their shape's very similar. So just the silhouette would only tell you you had a blackbird, but then you knew you got it down to 2. And the similar, if you look at this sparrow, they list it as a lark sparrow, but a sparrow, that's a good sparrow shape, and it would be, I'd be hard pressed to know that was a lark sparrow just on that. Now some birds, and this is another good example, if you look at this is a meadowlark, number 25 here, sitting on the post. Now a meadowlark here in Western Washington is going to be a Western meadowlark, but there's also a meadowlark in the eastern United States, and it occurs in some southern western states like Arizona, and they're virtually identical in plumage. So depending upon where you are, you may know it's either a Western or an Eastern, or you may not be able to tell. But still, silhouettes give you a lot of information. Now, sometimes size is only relative. And if you have these 2 woodpeckers, a hairy woodpecker and a downy woodpecker, in the tree at the same time, you can tell them apart because the downy is only half the size of a hairy. But if you have only one in a tree, it's really hard to tell what size it is. But if you look internally at the bird, you can get some characteristics that help you tell it apart. And that's what we mean by kind of looking into the bird. So here on the left, if you look at the hairy woodpecker here, if you measure from the front of its eye to the tip of its bill, then rotate that around, it will stick out the backside of the head. So they have a very big bill relative to the size of the head. If you look at a downy woodpecker and measure from the front of the eye to the tip of the bill and rotated it around, it doesn't go behind the back of the head. So comparing the size of the bill to the head helps you tell whether you're seeing a hairy woodpecker or a downy woodpecker, because you can't really tell the size of those 2 when they're by themselves. Now, color patterns, want you to focus on the big color patterns, not the details. And these are 2 birds that I picked because their detail is really exquisite. You look at the gadwall on the left here, look at all that fine feathering. But in terms of identifying, what you want to look at is the big colors. So it has a black butt, it has a gray body and a darker head, and a little bit of white back here on the tail, a little bit of white right behind the legs. Oftentimes they show a little white here on the wings. If you just know those three colors, black butt, gray body, darker head, that's enough. And know it was a duck, that's enough to tell you which duck it is. If we look at the bird on the right, which is a western meadowlark, notice the yellow chin and the yellow breast with this big black V in it, and then a spotty back. And again, look at that bill. It's kind of a long pointed bill, but a moderately big bill, long pointed, moderately big bill. That's enough for you to tell that that's a meadowlark. So we're looking at those big level kind of color patterns as we go through. Now, field guides are really good. They've got lots of information in it. And when you tend to look at a field guide, you tend to focus in on the details on there, at least I do. And what I want you to do is sit back and take a look at the big picture of this. And we'll use as an example this woodpecker. Now, if you look at this woodpecker, what would you say was the color patterns on there? Well, it's got a black body, a little bit of white in the neck and the head, and a red top to the head. When you see how it flies, it shows a little white in the wing, but it also has a very undulating flight, so it goes up and down when it flies. That's enough information to tell you that this was a woodpecker, and it's a pileated woodpecker. So you're looking for those big level color patterns in figuring this out. Now, when we talk about those patterns, we also want to look at specific parts of the body. So what's the pattern on the head? What's the pattern on the wings? We've got a bufflehead on the top here, and it's got this big white patch behind the eye and a big white patch on the wing. So we're looking at that big pattern stuff. Lazuli bunting on the lower left has a blue head, looks like it's been dumped in blue paint, and then with this orangey chest and white wing bars. See those white wing bars right there? Those are really important. Then this is a winter plumage American goldfinch, and they have white wing bars and then this kind of dull yellowish body. So those wing bars stand out. And then the Wilson's warbler, which is now coming back in pretty good numbers, the males have this black top knot and then the yellowish body. So we're looking for those big patterns. And you can get into some more specifics. So on the house sparrow on the top, you see it's got a line that runs from its eye back and then a white line above the eye. White line above the eye. And notice the bill shape there. It's kind of a conical bill. Black-capped chickadee has this big white cheek patch, a black chin and a black cap, and then a more pointed bill. So very different. And then this kind of shows you the specifics. Sometimes you're looking for white eye rings, like in this ruby-crowned kinglet. We don't get white-throated sparrows here very often. It's a good bird, but it shows you kind of the details that you can have around the head. So you're looking for those kind of patterns. Now, the wing is really important, and this gives you an idea of the feathers on the wings. And I just want to point out that these are coverts, C-O-V-E-R-T, not converts. Took somebody in the class to notice this misspelling on this. I'd taken this off the web. But what's on the wing up here, you can see the secondaries come off of the ulna and the primaries come off the hand part of it. The primaries give the power for flight and the secondaries give the lift for flight. And often they will vary in color. So you might see in a guide some talking about the patterns on the primaries. You need to know where they are. And then these coverts are what make the wing very smooth and aerodynamic. And they also will often vary in color. So let's look at some more examples of this. Here's some head features. This is a dark-eyed junco on the lower left. Its head looks like it's been dunked into a paint can. Notice on the marsh wren here, it's got black striping on its back and a white line through the eye. Again, we're looking again at the Wilson's warbler with the black cap. This is a Cassin's vireo, and notice the very distinctive white eye ring and then white along here. Often they talk about it as having spectacles. All right, this is again showing you that, and I've set up two birds that are on the left here that look very close, look very similar in terms of color patterns. So on the top is a ruby-crowned kinglet, and notice it has a wing bar, where on the bottom is an orange-crowned warbler, and it doesn't have any wing bar. So sometimes seeing those general patterns will help you separate it. Here's in the middle are two birds that look very similar. They're very blue. On the top is the lazuli bunting, which is over on the west side of the Cascades. But notice its big wing bars, where the western bluebird doesn't have any wing bars. So again, you're looking for that kind of differences. Here's two ducks that have big patch of green on their head. So notice that very nice iridescent green, but notice it's got brown all the way around it. That's a green-winged teal, where on the American widgeon, it's got more a whitish gray all the way around it. So you're looking for those patterns. So you may have that green on the head pop out first, but then think next what's around it, and that helps you tell them apart. Okay, bills. Bills also vary. Bills are a function of what does this bird eat? Where does it feed and how does it feed? So the three birds on the left are all ducks, but notice the little differences in the bill. The top one is an American merganser. They nest right now in wetland areas around here. It's got a very pointed bill with lots of little jaggies along the edge of the bill. It catches fish. The ringneck duck is a diving duck that goes down and eats a lot of mollusks or insects on the bottom. Its bill is a little different in shape. And then the northern shoveler is down here. It has a gigantic bill. It's a major filter feeder. So it sucks water in through the front of the bill and then pumps it out the side. And it's got all this lamellae there, kind of like a baleen whale, and filters out microscopic organisms. The marsh wren is down here on the bottom with the line through the eye and a pointed bill for catching insects. Sorry. And the evening grosbeak up here has a gigantic bill for crushing seeds. And the great blue heron has a pointed bill. It uses it for catching fish. And then a long-billed curlew is down here. Its bill is half as long as its body, and it probes it way down into the mud in order to get crustaceans and worms and mollusks, usually in wetland areas, but it also nests out in sagebrush habitat where it feeds a lot on insects out there. So understanding behavior, we're looking at kind of what are the behaviors of birds? How do they sit? What's their posture? How do they feed? Do they feed by flying someplace? Do they feed by jumping through bushes? Are they down on the ground eating seeds? What's their flight style? How do they all fly? And all of that helps you identify birds. If you look at posture, so take the two birds on the right. The top one is an American crow and the bottom one is a red-tailed hawk. You see them at a distance sitting on the wires. You may only be able to see the silhouette, but a crow will generally sit at a 45-degree angle, where the red-tailed hawk tends to sit more upright. So you get a little difference in posture. These two birds down here on the left, this is a Pacific wren. It's in the woods, and it often will bob up and down, so they're very active when you see them. The American dipper runs along the streams, goes into the water, and swims after aquatic insects. It also often will sit on a rock, bobbing up and down. So knowing those behaviors can help you identify a bird. So foraging behaviors, where do they forage? How do they forage? Swallows fly through the air and grab insects. Flycatchers usually sit in a place and fly out and to grab an insect. A warbler will jump through the trees looking for insects. Sparrows tend to be on the ground looking for seeds or insects. So all those help you in identifying. Same thing with wing style. Some things fly with a rapid flight. I mentioned woodpeckers. Woodpeckers tend to have this hard flap of their wings, and they fold their wings and they drop in the air and then they flap again and they come back up. So they have this very distinctive undulating flight that you can see at a long distance. You'll know it's a woodpecker. You may not see enough to know which kind, but you would know it's a woodpecker. And of course, the shape of the wings influence how they fly. Long pointed wings tend to be fast flyers. Rounded wings tend to be ones that can move much more quickly back and forth, but may not be as fast. So all that helps you out. Some things like eagles and turkey vultures soar. So knowing that this bird is up soaring will help you narrow it down to a set of birds. So habitat is really key. Birds have to make a living. So they make a living eating certain things, making their nests in certain places. All that plays out to where you're likely to find them. So they're adapted to those specific places where they can eat, reproduce, and survive and rest. So some things are in forests, some things are in wetlands, some things are in open scrub. We've got some things that like the scrub habitat east of the Cascade Crest, and so those will only be over there, not over here. So that distribution is playing out because of those habitat needs. Some things like urban areas, and we're going to go over a number of birds tonight that are found in suburban areas as a kind of starting point. So paying attention to habitat is really key. And then song, and we're going to do a bunch on song a little later tonight, but the 5 things you focus on song is what pitch is it? What's its frequency? Is the song, does it have repeat its notes, or do the notes vary in some way? And what's the speed of those? Do they change speed or change pitch as the song goes along? Are there pauses in between sections of the song? And what's the tone quality? All those things will help you play out. So we've kind of looked at these 5 things: size and shape, color pattern, behavior, habitat, songs, and calls. And it's all about helping you narrow down to a group of birds. And then as you see more detail, you start to figure out which one it is. So there's kind of 10 general tips for watching birds that I think is very helpful. You want to use all the information you can get, and usually you're trying to look for at least 3 things. You don't want to just focus on, oh, what's its head? You want to focus on, well, what's its head, but what's its body, what's the wing shape? You want to and what's its behavior? Behavior would fit in there. Habitat would fit in there. Focus on multiple pieces of information to help you identify the birds. If you know the common birds in your area, then you're going to spot something that says, oh, what was that? It just didn't quite look right. And then you can go check it out. So spend time watching robins, spend time watching the common stuff, because it will help you with the new things when they come out. Expect variation in species. Learn about their feathers and that they can move. Remember, size is only relative. If you watch birds with other people, and we don't have that opportunity right now, but hopefully we'll get to that, you can learn from other people. I think the magic of excellent birders is they bird a lot, and so they get to know the common stuff, and then they build onto that. And I want to stress, everybody makes mistakes in bird identification, including me. And I'll just tell you about one that I did last fall. I was teaching a class for Eastside Audubon, and we went out on a birding trip, and we were concentrating on some other birds, and then all of a sudden we saw some shorebirds land on the rocks. And I looked over at the shorebirds, and I said they were purple sandpipers. And I didn't study them really careful, because that was what I thought they were based upon the quick glimpse. Well, I happened to get a photograph of them, got back, looked at the photograph, and it wasn't a purple sandpiper. It was a surf bird, which is another kind of sandpiper. So, of course, I had to tell everybody on that field trip and everybody in the next class that I had gotten that wrong. It's okay to make mistakes. Just learn from your mistakes. Now, field guides are really good. I have several field guides, as you can see here, and I use them all the time. My suggestion is to flip through a field guide and look at it some. Get the field guides are put in taxonomic order, so they're keeping birds in groups in their families, and then work through that and get to kind of familiar with the birds based upon where they are in the field guide. It will help you go back and find them later when you're trying to look up something, and you may know, oh, this is a sparrow, so go find it in the sparrow section. So it's helpful to be familiar with it. Now I want to spend a little bit of time on Merlin, and we'll work through some birds. And Merlin is an app, it's free, it's from Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and it's incredibly useful in helping identify birds. And there's 5 questions that it asks before it gives you a list of birds. And so if you look at this, we're going to first do start a bird ID, and then it's going to ask you 5 questions. Where
Tom,
are you
can I
birds?
interrupt for just a second?
What's that?
This is Danielle. I was just wondering if people want a little bit of time to download Merlin quickly on their phones before we go in.
Sure, find out what people want.
Yeah, so if you want a little bit of time, if you want a few minutes to put this on your phone, just put something in the chat.
Should I keep working on this?
No one's asked, so go for it, Tom.
Okay. All right. So we're going to work through kind of these 5 questions. And what I'm going to do is show you it all on here. Then we're going to look at a bird. Then I'm actually going to open Merlin on the computer so you can see me step through all of this stuff. So we're going to go over it multiple times. So where are you birding? That's the first question. And if you're here on the west side of the Cascades, then I think for these birds I'm going to show you, you can use wherever you are. If you're over on the east side of Cascades, you might want to just type into this place or postal code, just type in Seattle and then get to that point. It's still going to work for you on the birds in your area, but Merlin is very good about making a list based upon where you are, because again, that habitat and distribution is important. What date? Today's date's going to be fine. What size of bird? Here's that bird yardstick from Cornell again. So we're going to click, what's the size? Sparrow size in between it, robin size in between that and crow, and then in between that, or Canada goose. So that kind of size. Then it's going to ask for up to 3 colors. You don't have to enter 3. If we were trying to key out an American crow, you would just enter black, but you can enter up to 3 colors. And then this last question is trying to combine both that habitat and behavior into one question, and it does a good job. It asks something about what was the bird doing, and so we will answer that. Then it's going to give you a list of birds, and if you see at the top here, there's actually 2 buttons. There's list and detail. And if you click list, it's going to show little icons for the birds. And if you click detail, it's going to show big icons for the birds. So let's look at our first bird. So here's our first bird we want to go over. So this is a medium-sized duck. If you look at the color patterns on it, it's got a black butt, a gray body, a little bit of white here on the tail. You can see the white on the tail. Often they show a little patch of white here, but it seems to be covered up. You can see the white on this one. And you can see these 3, oops, I'm in the wrong place, sorry. So black butt, a little bit of white on the tail. You can see the white on the tail here. Often they show a little bit of white right here, but it's covered up on all of these individuals. There's a little bit of white there and the white there. So black butt, a little bit of white, gray body is good to go with. This is the female. So again, you got that challenge. Sometimes the males and females have different plumage. Let me play its song here. All right, so you're going to have to kind of remember these birds, because when I go to Merlin, we're not going to be able to see this picture. But let's see if we can make this work. There we go. Now we're coming up. Okay, so I've got to find the Merlin app. So here's the Merlin app. It's this. They use a yellow-bellied sapsucker as the logo for Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So it has a yellow-bellied sapsucker on it. We want to click Merlin. So Merlin will open up. Now, if you see these 3 bars at the upper top here, if you click on those 3 bars, then it's going to give you, kind of more information that might be helpful. I just wanted to point out the bird packs down there. I clicked bird pack was partway down, and you can see, I've got a US West Coast bird pack loaded. I actually have a whole bunch loaded. Let's see if I can show that here. You can see there are bird packs for lots of places in the world. I've got it for Costa Rica and Panama and Australia. My daughter lives in Australia, so I got it when I went there. All right, so what we want to do is do this start bird ID to identify this duck. So we start the bird ID. So for me, I'm in Seattle, so I can use current location, but you could also click on map and be able to move your cursor around and find a place that way. Or you could type in Seattle up there, or type in another place and go to that place. So we'll do Seattle. Today's May 12th. That's good. Okay, the size. I'd say this is about crow size. So we'll do crow size. Now, 3 colors. So the colors, black, white, and gray. And then do next. All right, what was the bird doing? Well, it was swimming, so we'll do swimming. Now we'll do next. And it takes it a second to come up with the list of birds. So there's our list of birds that it thinks are good possibilities based upon what we entered. If you scroll down through the list, it will come down, you can't find your birds, and it asks you whether maybe you want to adjust those 5 questions in some way. So that's a possibility. I want to go back up. I want to touch the detailed at the top. So that detailed, and then you can see it shows them in bigger pictures. And again, you can scroll through it. So let's go back to that list mode. All right, so there's our list. So if we go down on my list, and if you're in a different location, you may have a different list, and I'll get and show you that in a little bit. But if we're going down, quite a ways down for me. I have down here at Gadwall. So if I touch Gadwall, that's our bird. Now, on the big picture up there, if you put your thumb on it and flick it one way or the other, you can flip through all the different photographs they have of the bird. So it shows you just some differences. So there's the male and there's the female, and then it shows you some other pictures to help you see what it there. You can see the bigger patches of white on the side of both those individuals that I was trying to show. That's a different bird. How do we get to that? All right, let's go back. So Gadwall. All right, now I want you to look down at the bottom. So we're in this info ID info one, and that's the one where it gives you a description of the bird. We can click on sounds, and then it's going to show you the sounds. If we do click on the female call, it will play. It will play that call, and it shows you a sonogram at the top. If we do the male call, it will do the same then. All right, they've got a lousy call compared to the female. Now, at the bottom here is the map. That's the third one. So you click map, and then it's going to show you the distribution for this bird. On these maps, the purple area is where they're found all year round. The red area is where they're found in the breeding season. The blue area is where they're found non-breeding, and the yellow is a migratory, so where they would move through during spring or fall migration. So each of these maps will give you some indication of it. Okay, so now we've finished. Oh, let me also point out, so if you have an eBird account and you enter eBird information, it's going to show up here whether you've seen this bird or not, and it's on your life list. So this app coordinates with eBird. You don't have to have an eBird account, but if you do, then it's going to coordinate and hook up and tell you whether you've seen that bird or not. Now, we've identified this, so we have 2 options. We can click here on, yes, this is my bird, or we can click on back. If I click on back, you go back and see this list. Maybe you've got another bird right in that location with these same characteristics. You can also see up here, see this home? If you click on that, it's going to take you all the way back to home. It will ask you, do you really want to start over? And you go, yes, and it's going to take you back there. Okay, I'm going to take us back to the bird now. All right, how'd people do? Were you able to figure this out as a Gadwall? You able to kind of step through that? I think I'll play its song again here. All right.
So Tom, we've got a question about, let me see, let me just go back here. Breeding, non-breeding on the map.
Yes.
Does that correlate to summer and winter?
For here in the Northern Hemisphere, yes, that's pretty much summer and winter, yes. Okay, so here's those blow-ups of the three tabs down at the bottom. So just to kind of go over that again. So the info tab will give you that detailed information. The sounds one will let you play sounds. And yeah, so on this, so you know, they're start breeding in April here in Washington, and you know, may breed into the early part of the summer. So you could have birds getting back down into here late summer, back down into the southern part of the US in late summer. So again, you know, the breeding season is often for different birds may start in March, may not start until May. And then, you know, when they end, it will start migrating. So you know, when we do some, if we do some shorebirds, a lot of times shorebirds will start coming south in July already from the Arctic. So there's some variation in that on non-breeding relative to the particular species. So then this is those three critical tabs to help you. All right, let's do another one. So you want to get back to the home and start a new identification. So you're going to start the bird ID. Location, same location as you used the last time is good. Same date that you used the last time is good. So size, this is small bird, it's sparrow size. So you do sparrow size. Colors, I'd say it's brown, gray, and white. Brown, gray, and white maybe. And you could either do sitting on the ground or in a tree or bush. I'm going to do on the ground. Now it should give you a list. All right, give you a chance to look at that list for a few minutes and see if you can figure it out. Again, remember, you can open up a bird, look at the different pictures, then go back, use the back button and go back and look at a different bird in that list. So you want to kind of work through that and try that. Let me play their songs. This is a common bird of the suburban area. It likes a little bit of bushes around. It likes along the edge of marshes. You know, it will be in lots of people's yards. It's common throughout Washington. That's the chip note, which you're often hear walking along the side of the street. How'd people do? Did you come up with song sparrow? So on my list, it was up near the top. And it might be a little bit ways down, depending on where you are. All right, let's do another one. All right, so you, again, the same location and same date. The size, this bird's a little bit bigger, so I'd put it at in between a sparrow and a robin. And I'll play its song. Colors, there's black on there. There's that, I guess I would call that a kind of rufous red. You know, you could go with orange too. I would think either one might work. A little bit of white on it. I did orange. We'll see if that works. And these are on the ground again. They do come to bird feeders. How's people doing? Did you come up with spotted towhee? So that's their song. Okay, so spotted towhee. So these two on the bottom are males. They have a very black head. The females often have less of a black head. They have some various levels of brownish to their head. So this is a little variation in their color. They like to feed on the ground. They're kind of sparrows, so they'll hop around in the ground. They nest in suburban areas. They nest in natural wild areas. So again, a common bird all up and down the West Coast. All right, here's another one. I'll play its song. So its size is small. So this would be sparrow size. Colors, white. I call that a buffy brown. And I might just go with those two, just two colors on this one. And these guys, generally you see them in a tree or a bush. They do, you can see there's one there, it is on the ground there, but I'd put it in the tree or in the bush on mine and see what we come up with. Did you go? Oh, I've already got the name up there. Bewick's wren. Boy, I gave that away before we even started. So Bewick's wrens are common in people's yards. They're often sit up. The one in my yard sits up and sings all the time now. Back in March when I first started to try to get out on the patio, I would bundle up in a sweatshirt and go out on the patio just to get a little fresh air. And the Bewick's wren in my neighborhood was singing in my neighbor's yard, and it flew over into my yard, into the tree above me, and then started scolding me. I think he was working for the authorities and told me I needed to get back inside. That was what the rules were. So they can be kind of feisty and scold you when you walk by. They're nesting in boxes in people's yards sometimes. They're sometimes, nest in little crannies in buildings. So they're a common bird in the suburbia. All right, let's do another one here. So again, we're going back. This is again a common bird here in suburbia. You want to go back, and its size is sparrow size. I'll play its song. Now, this one is, these different photographs help you see some of the variation that birds will have in their feathers. So, wait a minute. So if we look at all of these are males, all 4 of these are males, and see how much variation in the pinkish red color there are between them. That all has to do with how healthy they are, what they've been feeding, because they often convert the carotenoids in food into that pink color in their feathers. And so you see some of that variation in males between them. The female is down here, it's brownish. Anytime, any day now, we could have young out of the nest. This is a young bird that's just out of the nest. You can still see it has a few little down feathers on here, the one on the lower left. So when they come out of the nest, they look up fairly similar to adult. They're the same size basically as an adult. They often have different plumages than adult, and we'll look at a few of those as we go through this course. So let's see, size-wise, sparrow size. Color-wise, I'd say red or that Rufus red color, white and gray would work. And they're sitting in a bush. These guys also come to bird feeders a lot of times. So what you come up with? House finch? All right, we want to go back to the home page here, and I want to show you, so you can click home at the top and say yes, and go back to the home page. I want to show you how to use Merlin as if it was a bird book, and how to go through by groups of birds and figure out an identification that way. So we're going to touch this exploring birds on the bottom here, the one on the bottom. Now I'm not going to show you how to use get a photo ID, but Merlin is quite good if you can get a photograph. You can get the photograph onto your phone. Merlin will do a good job of figuring out a species of bird based upon the photograph. But we're going to do exploring birds now, so we'll go to that. Now, if you see on the upper right here, there's these funny little lines there. If you click that, then it's going to show you what bird packs you have, and you want to make sure you have the US West Coast bird pack clicked, which is probably what you have because we've been using that. But it also, again, shows you that there are bird packs for lots of parts of the world. And then I want you to click on likely birds. And then we're going to use, you can see there's 4 options. If you click most likely, it's going to use eBird data that's been collected by hundreds, if not thousands of people for your area to figure out what it thinks the most likely bird will be in your area. And then if you do the family, it's going to show you all the birds in the area by a family list. So just like the bird book. Or if you do family most likely, then it's going to show you just the most likely birds in your area based upon their family. And that's the one I want you to click. I want you to do family most likely, this one right here, family most likely. So we'll go to that. And we're going to work on, these are all woodpeckers. So make sure you've got this family most likely clicked. And then you can click done. And we're going to step through figuring this out for these woodpeckers. So I'm now going to jump over to my phone again and work it through for you. So again, you need to look at these 4. And if you're east of the Cascades or down in California or Oregon and doing this, you're going to come up with some very different species if you've used your local area to figure this out. So if you have Seattle or Olympia or up through Bellingham, we should be able to figure out these 4 species. But there are other woodpeckers in other parts of Washington and on the West Coast. So let's go find this new share here. Okay, so we want to do Explore ID here. All right, so I went into the refined bird list, that thing on the upper. So if I get out of this really quick here. All right, done. Oh yeah. So we went in and clicked on here. So clicked on those up there at the top, and then you can see the bird packs that I have, and then the most likely birds, and I want you to click family most likely. And then we'll click done. And then you see all of these little symbols on the right. Those are all symbols for different families of birds. So you have 2 options now. You can simply scroll by using your finger and scroll down through there. Or if you know the family you're looking for is halfway down, you can jump halfway down. And that's what I'm going to do right now is, see, this is a little miniature hummingbird, this one that's 5 down on the right. If you click that little miniature hummingbird, it's going to jump you down to where the hummingbirds are. And then if you scroll a little ways down, you're going to find the woodpeckers. So there's our set of woodpeckers. And on my particular one, it shows 6 woodpeckers. You might not have 6 where you are. If you're out in Issaquah, you could have a fewer number than that. If you're down in Olympia, you may have a little different number than that. And that's okay. But now we want to try to see if we can identify those 4 woodpeckers. Now, 2 of those woodpeckers don't have the name woodpecker in their name. So I'll just hold it here for a little bit, and then we'll go back to the photograph for you to help figure that out. But I just want you to kind of open up a couple of these now and look at them and jump backwards and see how you do that.
Tom,
Yeah,
we've got a question about the red circles and the orange circles next to the bird's name. So for example, Lewis woodpecker has a solid red circle and the
excellent. Yep, excellent question. Okay, so you see these, so see up here on the northern flicker, you see it has a little check mark beside it. If you have an eBird account, then it's going to keep track of whether you've seen that bird before in your life. Not necessarily here, but just seen it anywhere that in the world. And so I've seen these species, so it gives a little check mark. Now, if there's no circle along here, then it's a common bird in this area. If it's the circle that's half full, then it's considered a less common. And if it's a solid circle, then it's a rare bird. And so they're giving you some indication on what's the likelihood that bird is going to be in your area. So here at my house, hairy woodpeckers aren't very common, but you don't have to go very far from here to find hairy woodpeckers. If I was in denser forest, we'd see it. But my chance of seeing a Lewis woodpecker here is really slim. It's rare here in Seattle. So that's giving you, this is uncommon if it's that circle, and then rare if it's the half circle, and then rare if it's the solid circle. And what Merlin is doing is it's mining that database from eBird at Cornell Lab of Ornithology and figuring out what should it show for you here. And then it's giving you some idea that, oh, if you think it's a Lewis's woodpecker, you better look a second time just to make sure you're seeing everything right. So it's just helping you in that process. Did that answer that question? All right, let's go back to our pictures. All right, so here's our 4 birds. What did you come up with? Okay, so the upper left is a red-breasted sapsucker. And those are male red-breasted sapsuckers with the reds all around the head like that. This is a northern flicker. And notice the big white rump patch. When you see them flying away from you, that's a big prominent patch you see on them. They will have that undulating flight. So, and you see that white. A hairy woodpecker at the top here and a downy woodpecker at the bottom. Remember when we looked earlier, we were talking about telling these two apart, and you compare the length of this bill to the head. When you flip that bill from the eye forward around and go behind the head, we're looking how small the head is in a downy woodpecker. So that's those 4 woodpeckers. Now, just to illustrate how you're likely to get a different set of birds depending upon where you are, I've pulled this out for 3 locations. So Seattle, which is where I am, Issaquah, and then over in Yakima. And you can see for each of them, they list a different set of woodpeckers because they're differently abundant in those areas, different chances of seeing them. So it'll show you a different list. And again, that's feeding in on that information out of eBird. And again, the solid circle for when it's rare, and then the open circle for when it's uncommon. All right, so we want to stay in that exploring birds. So if you're back onto your list where it just shows you woodpeckers, if you scroll down through your list all the way down near the bottom, you're going to come to the New World sparrows. So you want to find the New World sparrows. These are 2 different sparrow species. There's going to be a lot of sparrows listed there, but we want to look for these 2 among that list. So what you're concentrating on is these both have stripes. They both have a dot. They both have stripes. They both have a dot in the chest. But notice this one has a little bit of yellow above the eye. It's also a little slicker body, a little more refined. It's kind of like the racing car versus the SUV over here on the left. So A is kind of more chunky looking. A likes to live in areas with brush. It'll live along the edge of creeks or on the edge of ponds that have cattails in it. It likes people's yards. Where B, how did I do that? B is a bird of the grasslands. It likes more open area with lots of grass. Some brush can be in there. Your fine bee at places like Magnuson Park, Marimore Park, Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge. That's open grassy areas. Discovery Park is likely to have that. So you want to look through this set of sparrows and see if you can come up with these two. Let me play their songs. Tip note there for it now. Now, this one has a much more higher pitch song. It's almost approaching where I can't hear it anymore because I'm losing my high pitch sound. What you come up with? Song sparrow and Savannah sparrow. Okay, let's do one more and then we're going to ask questions and take a quick break. So these are all wrens. These are 3 common wrens in our area. So you want to find the wrens by just scrolling. If you scroll up from the sparrows, the wrens are up there in a little ways. And you may have 4 or 5 or 6 wrens, depending upon where you are. But these are 3 common wrens in Western Washington. They're also all over Washington. And the one, number A, is the one that likes suburban neighborhoods. Number B likes to be in wetland areas. You see them in cattails and reeds of various kinds. And C likes more mature forests, particularly coniferous forests. So what are people getting for these? So you scanned up there. So you should get Bewick's wren for the upper left, Pacific wren for the lower left, and marsh wren for the upper right. So what I've tried to do is help you kind of think about groups of birds. So you notice how all of these birds are very similar in shape. So they've got that wren shape. So once you your first step might be, all right, I know it's a wren or I know it's a sparrow. And then you go and start to look through those. So that's how you would use Merlin to help you find a bird when you knew what group of birds it was in. And you can go and start to look for that. All right. Questions?
Tom, this is Danielle. I just want to jump in here quickly and tell people, let people know that to go birding for the first time and to walk away saying I identified that bird as a wren is like A+. You don't,
A+, yes.
Even if you don't know that it's a marsh wren or a Bewick's wren, to know that it's a wren is an awesome job. So
I agree. Yep. Yeah, and I think that's the first step, is getting to know these groups. And once you know these groups, then you can start to work on it. And so that's right. I agree 100%.
Tom, we did have one question back on the flicker. Where is the yellow shaft or the red shaft for the northern flicker?
Sure. Let me see if I can find it here. All right, and we'll have another picture later on. So what it's usually referring to is what's the colors of the shafts on their wings and on their tail. So neither of these 2 pictures show that very well, but they would have yellow shafts along there or red shafts. And what they're right now considered a single species, northern flicker, and that's because the 2 versions of them, the red shafted, which is the common western version, and the yellow shafted, which is the eastern version of the flicker, they interbreed and hybridize. And we actually have nice pure red shafted here, and then we also have hybridized ones here that will show some traits of the yellow shafted and some traits of the red shafted. So it gets very confusing. I don't try to separate them I just kind of lump them all into northern flicker and not worry about it. But you just have to kind of pay attention to a lot more details. They also kind of vary on whether the mustache is here and a few other things. But we'd have to look that up. I just don't have that memorized. Okay, any other question?
In general, if you just had a quick way to tell the difference between a wren versus a sparrow as they're flittering around.
Yeah. So good question, because they do have very different behaviors. A lot of times when you see the sparrows, they're going to be hopping around on the ground. They're going to be kind of moving maybe a little more sedately through bushes, and they tend to have a chunkier body. And if you look at the bill tends to be more conical in shape, where on a wren, they're often more active, so they go faster. They generally don't go on the ground. I mean, they do, but not a lot. And they generally move kind of through the trees at a faster rate. And if you look at the head, they've got that very thin, pointed bill. So let's see. So see the sparrow, see how this conical bill on here? And then if we go to the wren, see how the wren bill is very kind of pointed? And see these body shapes. This body shape is almost like a kind of stretched out ball with a little bill on the front, where this is a much more chunky body, very different body shape. So kind of getting a sense for those body shapes. And it takes time. I mean, this is not something you're going to instantly get, but as you see more sparrows and see more wrens, you'll start to get that feel for that subtleness. And I think I forgot to mention, so I'm talking about these general subtle things, and a good example of that is you can recognize your friends, you can recognize your family when you're walking down the street. You may be walking down one side of a street. Well, we used to be able to walk down streets, but walking down one side of the street and it was crowded. There's lots of people on the other side of the street and it's crowded, and there's traffic moving by, and a quick glance, you'll spot somebody and you instantly know them. You didn't know them because you've memorized all their details. Your brain is just really good at absorbing lots of this kind of general gestalt about somebody that you then can translate back into, so you instantly recognize that. And what I'm suggesting here is focusing on these 5 things. You will start to pick that up yourself. You'll start to get that general feeling. Oh, I saw a glimpse of that and I know it was a sparrow. I may not know which one it was, and that's a fantastic step forward. So I think the more you get the chance to watch and identify some stuff, your brain is going to learn so much details here that it's just magnificent. Any other questions?
So we have a question about how Merlin is set up, which I think we can talk about that maybe in the Google Classroom or later on.
Okay.
And then one other question about someone wants to know if there's a scale of size for the birds. And maybe if you can, like a 1 to 10 scale, maybe if you know the reason for why Cornell has its size scale done the way it is with the different size birds.
Sure. Part of the challenge of size is how close the bird is to when you see it. So, we see a bird out in the field. If the bird is fairly close to us, it's going to look bigger than if it's farther away. So it's just really hard to judge size in any absolute way. And so they picked those 4 birds because they thought most people in the United States would know those 4 birds. They would know, well, they used a house sparrow because it's a really common sparrow, but a little sparrow and then a robin and a crow and a Canada goose, and think that most people would have that. So they would get that sense of a relative size compared to those species. So they kind of focused it that way. How can we translate this into something that people can use when a bird may be close to them or a bird may be far away? And it's just remarkably difficult to look at a bird and say, oh, I think that thing is 18 inches long, and maybe 12 and maybe 28. It's just really hard to put an absolute number on it.
And we do have a few more questions, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to make sure we hold on to all those questions and we either get them answered at the end or we answer them in the Google Classroom. But I'll just pitch this one here because I know you're going to get to it. Someone asked what the difference between a call and a song is.
Sure. So, you know, it's all relative. Generally, what they mean is a song is the tune that a bird uses in establishing a territory or courting a mate. So those are often known as songs, where a call is a shorter note that's used in other kinds of interactions. May be important in defending a territory, may be important in working with your mate, but it's often kind of used outside of the context of setting up that territory or attracting a mate. Now there's obvious overlap. So, you know, it's not this nice clean line where you could always say, oh, that's definitely a call, that's definitely a song. But we're going to look at some songs in particular right after we take a short break here and, you know, see what we find.
The students are using Merlin on your t-shirt, Tom.
Oh, all right, good. Yeah. So this was from a birding trip that I did over to Moses Lake in central Washington. So 4 species of blackbirds that you would find in the Moses Lake area. All right, so it is 7 minutes after 8. If people need a quick run to get a drink and I'd like to fill up my drink, can we be back in 3 or 4 minutes? So say start again at 8:11.
That sounds good to me.
Okay, I'm gonna run get another drink.
Okay. This is Danielle. I'm still here. You might be able to see me on the video now in case I'll turn my light on in case anyone has any questions. I realized we should have put together a little exercise program here. For 3 minutes, flap your wings like you're a northern flicker.
Exactly, yes.
Or move your rump like you're a wren.
Yeah, bob your tail up and down, right? Okay.
Oh yes, we definitely would need sweat towels if we did if we were flying like hummingbirds.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh boy, they put out the energy, that's for sure.
And for people that had questions about eBird, I'm going to put a link in the chat to the eBird website so you can all go look it up. And I suppose if I ever want to get a life list as big as Tom's, I should start keeping a life list.
Yeah.
And go to Australia.
That's right. Okay, we ready to get started again? Okay, I want to spend some time on sounds and help you start to kind of listen to sounds and start to help you learn how to identify birds based upon sounds. And I'll start off by playing a soundscape that I recorded out at Stillwater Wildlife Area, which is out near Carnation. Now, this is a Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife area, and it's a great birding place. It has opened up. They are asking you to, maintain social distances there. And we'll talk about this site at one of the later lectures. But, if we look at this, this is a sonogram. And then on the top, it shows this kind of histogram thing that's based upon how loud the calls are. I don't actually find that in the part in green up here at the top very helpful, but it's in some apps, so I put it in here. But this is the sonogram, and we're going to look at more sonograms, but I want to point out a few things for you to pay attention to. Along the right here is the frequency. So as you go up here, it's a higher frequency. And right down here on the bottom, it's now covered up by this there. Maybe that will disappear. See if I can get that. You see that? It's a low frequency sound here. That's going to be the American bittern. And this first part is when it gulps in air because it blows up its esophagus like a balloon. And then the second part is when it uses that air to make it sound. So you get to hear that as we go along. And the cursor should run across this as we go. This is the red-winged blackbirds calling, the kind of sharp here. The brighter the yellow color is, the louder the song. And then all of these little up and down lines in here are the tree swallows calling. So I just want to play this soundscape here. That was the red wing. You can hear the tree swallows shipping in the background. Here comes the gulping for the American bittern. Wasn't that sexy? So that's the male calling the female. We're going to get to another red-winged blackbird here. So in the distance, there was another American bittern calling. So, lots of birds will sing, and they tend to sing most early in the morning and late in the afternoon. Now, they could sing all day, all through the day, but, if you go out early in the morning, you're more likely to hear multiple things singing at once. And so that's what's known as a soundscape. And then as you start to pick out which species is which, if you know that that's a species and you know what it is, you may want to go see it. Or you also may know, okay, I know what that is, but I don't know over here on the left, but I don't know what's calling over on the right, so I'll go look for that. So we're going to work through this. And again, take it slow. My recommendation is come up with a list of 15 birds in your area that you would want to learn the songs for, and don't try to learn everything. And I have a list at the end of this that you can manipulate and make into your own list. So let's kind of go through and see how this works. All right, so how do you learn songs? You know, one, you can listen to recordings. You can watch a bird sing and learn it that way. And many people say that's the best way for you to learn it, is to find a bird singing and identify it. Some people put mnemonics on it that puts words to what their song sounds like, and that can be helpful. Knowing what habitat you're in helps you eliminate lots of possibilities. Now, the Merlin app, as you saw, has bird songs in it, so that's a place you can go look for it. Many of the apps around bird books also have bird songs in it. There's an app that's especially designed for helping you learn bird songs called Larkwire. It sets up quizzes for you to take and works you through, and you can set it at different levels of difficulty, and it'll work through birds in your area. It's quite well done, very sophisticated, absolutely drives me nuts, but that's me. So, and then there's also electronic CDs. And in the download section on Google Classrooms, I've made a small album of some of the local suburban birds in Washington and given you multiple long examples of their calls in case you find out, or their songs, in case you think you're listening to a 2-minute or 3-minute song for a Bewick's wren will help you learn it better than listening to the short clips that are in Merlin. You're welcome to download that album. It should load up into iTunes or some other media player like Spotify, and be able to use it there. So how do you go about it? One way to do it is to visualize the song. There's a professor, Donald Kreutzma, who's done his whole career was about bird songs, and he's got a whole bunch of really good books out there. Somebody asked him once, how did he learn all these bird songs that he knew? Because he knows them all over the world. And he said, I learned them with my eyes, and that's by visualizing it. Maybe that works for you. Maybe it doesn't. You know, it semi-works for me. But that's one way to do it. Putting mnemonic on it, that's a set of words on it, kind of paying attention to the quality of sound. And again, I'd say just start with 10 to 15. Don't overwhelm yourself by trying to learn all the birds of Washington. Now, there's some terms or ideas that are really important in it, and that's what's the pitch of the song, the frequency of it, that's the pitch. Are the notes repeated and how fast they are? Does the song change in speed or change in pitch as you go through the song? Are there pauses as it's going on? And what's its tone quality? And we'll work through each of these. There's 5 basic pitches. There's the monotone, and then what I've tried to do is show them over here. So a monotone is something with a frequency that's just flat. There's the upslurred sounds, which goes up as the note is done. There's downslurred, which it goes down. There's overslurred, which means it goes up and across and down. And then there's underslurred, which means it goes down and then back up. It's not important that you learn these terms. It's just that you have this idea that notes can change, and if you understand how they're changing, that can help you identify a bird. Now, there's 4 basic patterns of repetition and speed, and you ask 2 questions. Excuse me. Does the bird ever sing the same note twice? So 2 notes at the same pitch, kind of same length, same note pitch. Or the second question was, can you count those notes, or are they so fast that you can't count them? So with that, you can come up with 4 words that describes it. So if they repeat the notes, so it's the same note twice, then it's known as a series. And a pied-billed grebe, and we're going to look at a pied-billed grebe in a minute here. A pied-billed grebe does a series because it has the same note and it repeats it. And yes, you can count them. Are the notes unique, but you can still count them? So like a black-capped chickadee, the kind of standard song for a black-capped chickadee is either people call it Phoebe, and it goes, you know, slightly higher, slightly lower. I tried to whistle, but I can't whistle. Or sometimes people will say it's Sweetie, or hey, sweetie, if they use 3 notes in that. And so that's a phrase. So they're unique notes, they change, and they're slow enough that you can count them. Now, a trill is when they repeat that same note over and over and over again, but it's so fast, generally more than 8 per second, that you can't count them. And those are trills. And the dark-eyed junco, which is again a common bird here, has a trill, and it's just this constant kind of buzz that goes forth. Where a warble is if there's a whole bunch of unique notes put together, but they're also so fast you can't count them. And the house finch is one that has a warble. All right, so let's look at the pied-billed grebe. So this is one that has a series of notes, so known as a series. And listen to this. So you can see in the sonogram over here that it's kind of low in frequency and the notes are all the same. So pied-billed grebes nest in wetland areas here, well, all through Washington, but they're nest in wetland areas. They should be on eggs now. They may be hatching relatively soon. They build a floating nest out in the marshy area. You can find them at like Magnuson Park or Union Bay or Marymore Park, any wetlands areas they're likely to be around. Now the canyon wren is a bird of east of the Cascade Crest, so it's not over on the western side of the Cascade Crest, and it occurs all down through western United States. And if you look at the sonogram, you can see that each of the notes is down-slurred, but then the whole series is down-slurred, so you get that kind of going down across it like that. And notice these first two are very similar. So there's this pause in between, and then it repeats its song. And this one's very similar. But notice the third one is different. And so a lot of birds will have multiple songs, and you hear that in this example. But each one is this down-slurred. And notice the notes are a little farther apart. It kind of slows down, almost as if it runs out of energy. If you've hiked in places like Tatum Creek over near Yakima, you might well have heard this as you're hiking up through the canyon. Now this one will be different. So listen how different, but you can see it's different there. Okay, we've gone over song sparrows a couple times on identification, and here is the song sparrow for you to look at. So they have a series, a set of phrases put together. So you see there's 4 notes that are the same, and then a lower whistle, and then a higher long whistle, and so it jumps around. And again, these first 2 songs are fairly similar, and then this third one is quite different. The standard male song sparrow doesn't learn its song until it decides where it's going to spend its rest of its life. This is a permanent resident bird. Once the male decides where he's going to live, that's where he lives until he dies. And he learns the songs from the surrounding males, and he has a repertoire of about 9 songs, and because he needs to sing them to help defend his territory. So let's listen to this song sparrow. All right, so that's that kind of set of phrases running together there. Now the house finch, again, a common bird in Washington, a common bird in suburbia here on the west side of the Cascades and in a lot of the residential areas all through Washington. It does a warble, so you can see these notes are all really close together, so you won't be able to count them, and they jump all around, so lots of different pitches in there. that's an example of a warble, and a house finch is something you could be here singing now. They will nest in people's yards. They're actually nest in hanging baskets sometimes, where they'll build the nest right in the hanging basket of like a flowers, and makes it hard for you to water. Now, pitch is the frequency that the song comes out at, and different birds have their songs at different pitches. And this is a brown creeper, which is again a common bird here in Washington. It's often a little harder to find because, as you can see, it's a small little brown jobby. It feeds by going up the trunks of trees, so it's just hard to spot. But it has a very high-pitched song, and it's actually starting to hit the limit of where I can hear. Now, I've taken care of my ears throughout my life, but I'm now just getting older, and you tend to lose that ability to hear the high-pitched songs as you get older if you're unfortunate like me. So sometimes when I'm out birding with other folks and they say they hear brown creeper, I won't have heard it, and it drives me nuts. But listen to what these guys sound like. So we've had some, like the pied-billed grebe, with a very low frequency call, and then here, this is the brown creeper with a really high frequency call. Now, the black-capped chickadee, common bird here in Washington, it has one of its song notes is this two-phrase, Phoebe, Phoebe. Here it only gave the fee, and then we're back to the Phoebe. Now, here in Western Washington, they also have a series where they're due anywhere from 3 to 6 whistles all at the same pitch. And so it's not in this particular tape, but some of the ones that I put on that album for you to download, you'll hear that other call that a black-capped chickadee gives. So this is the chickadee call, but we're listening to this one now. Phoebe. So mnemonics is like that Phoebe, those two words is the mnemonics. All right, some birds vary in how loud their song is, and this is a yellow-breasted chat. It's a bird of east of the Cascade Crest. It likes riparian areas. If you've hiked up places like Tatum Creek or gone along the edge of any of the canyons over there that have a lot of cottonwoods and brush in the bottom of the canyons, you may well have heard this bird. It has a huge repertoire of calls, and it mixes them all up in random ways, and you hear that in this series of songs. All right, just to kind of get a little more sense of that repetition and rhythm, is I've gotten two birds side by side here that we're listening to. The marsh wren has very fast, kind of trill notes, and then the white-crowned sparrow has a much slower, more sedate kind of set of phrases going together. Marsh wrens like marshy areas, any place where you find that. Marimore Park, marshy areas at Discovery Park or at Union Bay, you can find marsh wrens. White-crowned sparrows tend to like little opener areas. There was one singing in the parking lot at Fred Meyer's in Lake City today when I stopped by there. So they are around. So let's listen to these two. A very fast trill. Well, a little more like a warble because it changes. Okay, so much more sedate where you could count each of those notes. Now, an example of a trill is the dark-eyed junco. Again, they're nesting. They may well have young in their nest now. We could have babies out of the nest anytime soon. They're the bird with this kind of dark head on there. And you can see they actually have two separate notes in each of there, but it's so close together and so fast, we only hear it as a single note, as this single series of single notes that make this trill. I have a male that likes to sit on the dormer of my next door neighbor's house and just sing up there early in the morning. All right, tone quality. You know, I love music and I wish I was more musical, but I have a hard time with tone quality. So it all depends on how you are in terms of hearing that. But there's a whole series of things that they talk about in calls. Is it a clear call? Is it a whistle? Is it harsh? Is it buzzy? Is it scratchy in nature? So these are all different terms that often get applied to songs. And I'm going to show you two that help illustrate that. Two of the common birds around here are an American robin and a black-headed grosbeak. And their songs are often hard to tell apart. The American robin has a much smoother song. It's not as choppy as what we're seeing the black-headed grosbeak. And often what they characterize the black-headed grosbeak is as a drunken robin. So it's a robin that had too much alcohol, and so it kind of has this very choppy call and a little faster. And with practice, you can tell that apart. But I'll be honest with you, you know, a lot of times I will hear a robin singing and I will sit there and try to listen to that robin, trying to hope that it might be a black-headed grosbeak. Now, with practice, you get better at doing that, but these can be hard to tell apart, and that's just, you know, it takes practice. So let's hear the two of these. All right, so that was smoother. Now we'll listen to the choppy one. Okay, tone quality again. These are two birds that have absolutely beautiful songs, Swainson's thrush and hermit thrush. And they're good ones to learn their songs because you're likely to hear them when you're out hiking this summer. Swainson's thrushes nest in the lower elevations, generally in the wet forests up to about 4,000 feet, or on the dry forest on the east side up to about 4,000 feet, and then they're replaced by the hermit thrush higher up. And if you look at the sonograms over here, notice the song here for the Swainson's thrush is this upward series of notes, where on the hermit thrush, they open with an initial whistle, and notice between these different songs, that whistle changes in pitch. So you can actually hear that opening long whistle, and it will be different pitch between different songs. And then it has this flourish, this kind of jumble here That's that fancy warble going up and down of a whole bunch. So a very different pattern between these two birds. Swainson's thrushes, they're both migratory, and I'll show you a map of this in a minute, but Swainson's thrushes are coming back from South America right now. They should be arriving in May. By late May, they're likely to be around singing. They may not be here yet, but they should be coming pretty soon. Hermit thrushes migrate up and down the mountains, so you could be seeing hermit thrushes still down the lowlands, but as the summer progresses, by June, they're going to be up at higher elevations. So let's hear these two. That's their call. Do that upward all the way through the whole song. I often call that a kind of reverse waterfall, but you know, develop your own name that helps you remember that. Be a lower pitch now. Now up higher pitch. It's a very kind of flute-like, oboe-like in their songs for both these species. So just to kind of give you a little sense, so many birds migrate. Some are permanent residents here, some migrate. These two thrushes migrate in a very different way. So you can see in the winter that the Swainson's thrush is down in the Andes, where in the winter we've got hermit thrushes all along the Pacific coast and down in the southeast. These are both animations that are going to move across the year here and show you kind of how these birds move with the season. Okay, mnemonics. A good example of a bird that people use a mnemonics for is the olive-sided flycatcher. And again, this is a bird of the mid-elevation to high elevation forests here in Washington. So if you hike up through, you know, any of the forest areas, you're good chance of hearing this bird. It's a flycatcher. It likes to sit on a high perch and then fly out in order to grab an insect, and then it'll come back to the perch. Often will come back to the same perch and go to the top of a different tree. But its song is often called Quick Three Beers. Quick Three Beers. Quick 3 beers. I'm embarrassed to say I used to think it said quick 3 beards until I said that to a friend of mine and he laughed for about half an hour. So where do you go to find bird songs? So we went over Merlin. That's a good place to find bird songs. And they have often several examples so you can get some of that geographic variation or local variation in it. The electronic version of bird books, the apps on phones will have them in there too. Then there's 2 websites that are really good to know about. One's called All About Birds. It's Cornell Lab of Ornithology's site on the web. And if you go on there, you can type in the name of a bird and it's going to give you lots of information, including a page that will have bird songs, might have videos on it. So I have a lot of stuff. Then there's also another website called Peterson's Field Guide to Bird Sounds, and it's the repository of 7,500 songs that go along with the field guide to bird songs that the Peterson series puts out. And so it will have lots of examples for each species. So again, you can see some of that variation. It also shows sonograms for all of those, so you can watch that kind of movement of sonograms. Both of those are free. They're sites you can go on to and then use, you know, the bird name and find stuff. So where to start? So here's a list of birds, and I think we put a version, a Word document version of this up on Classroom, Google Classroom. This list has, I forget, 25 or 30 lists on it. Then I put asterisks by the 15 birds that are common in my particular yard or my particular neighborhood. You know, what I would say is you take a list like this, take off the ones that aren't in your area. If there are some that are better than what I have here because you're real common in your area, like maybe, you know, down around Olympia, you might be in a place that has California scrub jays, so you'd want that instead of one of these. You know, that's what you ought to do, is make a list of about 15 birds, maybe only 10, depending upon where you want to start, and just try to learn those and pay attention to them in your neighborhood when you're out walking in your neighborhood or in a local park. Don't try to learn everything at once because it becomes overwhelming. Let's take a minute here and see if there are any questions.
We had a question about sound from Peter, and in terms of frequency ranges beyond high or low, is there any way you can translate that into megahertz?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So let me go back here.
And then Peter also had another question for values for the relative abundance scale. And I missed that, so I'm not sure what that's connecting to. So Peter, feel free to.
On this map. So this map is done by eBird. So this is using eBird data. And the challenge with eBird data is it's data collected by whole lots of people, thousands and thousands of people. And you have to kind of take into account effort and distance and, you know, how, and maybe kind of experience of the people. And they've developed some amazing algorithms for analyzing those data and trying to take into account all the variables that could influence, you know, what people are collecting. So the specifics on how they come up with this relative abundance, I don't know the details, but I know that they're using actually millions of records in order to kind of process this. And until recently, they've only just in the last year expanded things like the Swainson's thrush to look over its whole range, because they didn't have enough data from Central and South America until relatively recently. So, you know, they're not putting an absolute number on there. They're saying relative, and I can't tell you beyond that.
What does 31.07 mean? How do you know where that number comes from?
I have no idea. I will try to do some homework on that and see if I can figure that out. So if you see on the right-hand side, this is really hard to see. So right down here where let's help get the cursor. So right there, that's 2 kilohertz. This is 4 kilohertz there. So 4 kilohertz there, 10 kilohertz up there. So the Swainson's thrushes are starting at about 1.5 kilohertz and then running up to 8 kilohertz with a little bit up higher than that.
Joanne had a question about songs changing over time. And then Joanne, just jump in if you're talking over geological time or seasonality.
So most birds learn a repertoire of songs. Some are very limited in it. So a white-crowned sparrow will sing one song, and that's the only song it sings. Junco will sing one song, and that's the only song it sings. And then something like a song sparrow may have a repertoire of 9 different songs, and it sings those same songs for its whole life. Now, the song sparrow here in my yard in Washington may have a different set of 9 songs than one over in Yakima or one in Eastern Washington. So there is geographic variation in what those songs sound like. I don't think birds generally have their song change as they age. It's generally kind of they learn it, and then that it's kind of set in there. Now, there's 2 major groups of birds that, well, there's a bunch of groups of birds we've looked at, but if you take the songbirds, which are things like the sparrows and the thrushes and the juncos and the warblers, they learn their song. They're either going to learn their song from their parent, which is what a white-crowned sparrow does. It learns it basically as it's coming out of the nest from its parents and the local birds there. Or like a song sparrow will learn it once it gets to where it's going to spend its life. Then there are things like the olive-sided flycatcher that we looked at. Their songs are genetically programmed into them, so they don't go through a learning process. I don't know, did I answer that question?
Yeah, Joanne just added in over the years. So I thought, so the question is, maybe do songs change as human language changes?
Oh, okay, I see what you mean. You know, I think that's a center of a lot of research going on, and some really kind of fascinating stuff. Hermit thrush that I showed you an example of. So they open with that opening whistle, and then they have a flourish that varies a lot. So, you know, they have patterns of that change, that are different in different parts of the country. So they've obviously kind of learned them somehow. And yes, those songs may not change in an individual bird, but that dialect in that general area may change over time. So there is some of that that's taking place. Then there's, you know, like a number of species. Nashville warbler is one that we get out here, and the Nashvilles out here sound different than the Nashvilles that go up into Canada, into the boreal forest. So there's that geographic variation has happened somehow, and that's kind of over time. So yeah, there is changes on long time spans. Other questions?
I think Tess answered your abundance.
Oh, good.
Birds per kilometer per hour.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Excellent. All right, well, we only have about 10 more minutes. So there are other questions that people want to ask?
Tom, were you going to wrap up here?
No, well, I don't think I'm going to go into the next, but let me get back to where I was. So there's some more in this series, in this presentation, but the next is just more practice with Merlin. So I've got a series of slides for people to, you know, just practice using Merlin to identify stuff. So you can go and play with that on your own.
And Tom, you posted that video. It's a video you made, right?
No, there are videos posted that are similar to this. So 4 separate videos that are there that will go through and help you kind of work through all of this. So yeah, those are videos, but I also put up this PowerPoint as a PowerPoint, so you can download it as a PowerPoint and look at it that way. So they're both up there.
We have a meta question here. What's the trajectory of this class? What are you hoping we will learn?
Excellent question. So today I wanted to kind of concentrate on those 5 characteristics that help you understand identifying birds, get to use Merlin and practice with Merlin on using that. Then over the next 3 sessions, we're going to add about 30 new birds in each session. And then we're going to start looking at places where you can go birding. So next week, we're going to look at a lot at suburban parks and where can you go birding in suburban parks and what might be the group of birds that you would find in those places. And then in the third one, we're going to look at some places, some of which are open, some of which aren't. But if you go farther out from Seattle on like a day trip, went up to the Skagit area to look for birds up there, what might you find doing a loop through someplace like Fur Island, or go down to Nisqually, which happens to be closed still, or out to Stillwater, which is out near Carnation, and it is open. You can walk there. So where are some places that you can go, and what are the birds that you're likely to find in there? And then the fourth one, I want to go east of the Cascade Crest. So if you have the chance to take an all-day trip, where might you go if you're here in Seattle and go up over the Cascade Crest? Where might be some good birding places that you could go to? And then also I want to do what might be a multi-day trip if we ever get to do that this summer, to go up to kind of the Okanagan area in central Washington, because there's a whole suite of more birds that you could find up there. So I want to try to look at some different places and talk about how you might go about finding those birds on your own when you don't have a trip leader there that can help take you out to a local park or take you out to one of these wildlife areas here in Washington, Western Washington, or across the Cascade Crest.
I also wanted to jump in and say, usually a lot of people come to Mountaineers classes so they can interact with other people and meet and greet. And because we're not meeting in person, we've set up the Google Classroom. And for some people who get a lot of emails, they might want to turn off the email notifications. But my hope is that we can make that Google Classroom be a place where people can interact. You can ask questions. Other students who have knowledge, feel free to jump in and answer questions if Tom and I don't. But sort of make that the interaction that we can't really have right now. And then, Tom and I will do our best. We do have a few chores to do. He didn't finish mowing his lawn today.
No. Yeah.
I also want to thank everybody for sticking with us with all this technology and learning all sorts of new things. And feel free to give Tom or myself feedback and ways we can make the next class better. We do have it's possible that I missed some questions on the chat tonight, so feel free to share them with me or put them in the Google Classroom. We'll make sure to get them answered. We did get a note. Let me see. There's a question here. In what species do females sing?
That's a big place of a lot of research right now. And people used to think that not very many females of birds sang, and what they're discovering is actually a lot of them do. And so I can't actually name a whole bunch. One example is black-headed grosbeaks. The female will sing on the nest while she's incubating eggs, and it'll often be with a fairly soft song, but she will sing there. So it's a center of major research right now. I think I just saw there was a big monograph came out on it in this last year, kind of summarizing the state of knowledge. I haven't read it, so I can't give you a lot of details, but it's fascinating, as we look more and more how much we have to learn about birds and life and what all's really going on there.
And also, for anybody who needs to get out of the house, Tom just gave you all permission to go to the grocery store and bird in the parking lot for as long as you want. So when you get home and your housemate says, "Why did it take you 6 hours to do the grocery shopping?" you can say, "Wow, I heard some house sparrows in the parking lot at Fred Meyer's."
That's right.
So birding in quarantine. All right, we've got one question that I'll have answered now, and then we'll let you all go. And there's one question we'll save for the Google Classroom. So we have a question about bird cams. Bird spy cam in my backyard. Is there a way to video your birds?
Oh, I've never set up a bird cam, so I don't know exactly how to do it. I mean, you can video them with, well, you'd be far away with a phone, but if you have a camera with a telephoto lens, you can video on that, but it won't not, you can't necessarily project it live onto the web. I think you have to have special setups to do that. There are a lot of bird cams out there. Both Cornell runs a whole series of them if you want to find some to look at, but I don't know how to set one up myself.
I've spent a lot of time in quarantine watching owlets, like 2 or 3 hours at a time watching baby owls. It's very soothing. But on the Cornell bird cam, I don't have one myself. All right. Tom, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
Let me just jump one more thing. So homework, I would say practice using Merlin or a bird book to identify some birds, paying attention to those 5 things we talked about: size and shape, color patterns, behaviors, habitats, and songs. And then come up with your own list of 15 or so birds that you want to try to learn their songs. And get out in your neighborhood, get out in your yard, get out in a local park if you have one that you can get to, and just watch some birds and watch an individual bird for a while and just get a sense on how they move. All of these ones move in different ways. So as you start to learn that, that will be helpful. And I think most important, have fun. All right.
Have a good week, everyone.